All right, so the other intro handout we've given out or will give out are um, still based on the intro to component form, but rather than just adding vectors, we're going to introduce you guys to like the official form. We call it the component form of a vector. So we're going to start by looking at vector AB, and we call it AB because point A is the start, and the end of the arrow, like the arrowhead, is point B. So if you draw a line from point A to point B, we call that a vector, and we'll call it vector AB. So let's see what else. Well, as you can see in this example, this picture, the point of talking about vectors is not only is it just the length of a vector or the size of the number, but specifically also the direction that it is pointed. So those two things together make a vector. You can't just have a magnitude of 6. You have to also tell us the direction of the unit 6. So here, what we're going to start to introduce, like I said, is, there we go, component form, which is a ordered pair. So the ordered pair describes basically the change in the x and the y values as it says here. So in the graph, let's see, well, it says the graph below, but this graph up here, what you'll notice is that first thing is to be in component form, the vector actually has to start at the origin. So the vector starts at 0, 0 and heads some direction for some length of an arrow. All right, in fact, it's written, let me do this. Let me add some emphasis on a couple of these things. So emphasize must be at 0, 0. The initial point, the tail of any vector in component form must be at 0, 0. The next thing, okay, so we're going to keep this picture and this paragraph together. So it says the graph below and the graph above, the initial point is 0, 0. The terminal point has coordinates 2, 5. They're referring to right here. So here's 2, and the end of our point here is 5. So the coordinate of this end point of our arrow is 2, 5. Right? But when we write it as a vector, we don't put parentheses 2, 5 like a parentheses x, y. The component form of a vector uses this notation, right, with the kind of more of the triangle brackets. So as soon as you see triangle brackets like this, we are now talking vectors. We're not just talking about a point on the graph, but rather a vector that starts at 0, 0 and ends at the coordinate, the x, y coordinate. So in this case, if we see vector triangle brackets, we start at 0, 0, we find point 2, 5, and we draw a line straight over to it. Let's see. So when you see this, yeah, just means it starts at 0, 0. We've been calling this component form, but specifically when we start at 0, 0, we get to call that standard position. So we may have vectors, as you'll see down below here. We have lots of different vectors. None of them are in standard position. Because again, in order to be in standard position, the initial point must be 0, 0. So in fact here, what it's asking us to do in this paragraph is move each vector, u, v, w, and a, into standard position. And then once we do that, we can write each vector in the component form. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's take a minute here. And we will start with u. No, that's not in the left corner, but u itself, we're going to start u, so we see u is down to right 2. So all we're going to do is we're going to move that vector, but keep the magnitude and direction the same. Okay, so there's vector u. We moved on to red next, v. V is over 1, 2, 3, over 4 up 1. So over 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so there's vector V, and it is now in standard position. W we had blue, so let's keep with that. Up 3, right 1, so up 3 to the right 1. Okay. So you'll notice that no matter which vector we're using, you could basically try and like take and like almost cut this out and slide it and paste it over here. Or in the case of U, we cut it from this position on the XY graph and we just simply slide it over. But the point is you always start with your tail starting at the origin. And let's see, we have let's go with that purple. 1, 2, 3, 4, down 4 over 3. And that is vector A. Now, first thing is to move each vector to standard form. The next thing, we want to write these, so I'll write them in their respective corners on the margin here. We'll write these in standard position. So starting with U, we have our triangle bracket. And the coordinate for the end of U is 2, -2. So we just simply write 2, -2. But again, it's triangle brackets, not parentheses. V, we'll go over here and do V. V, as long as we started at the origin, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So V looks like this. It's -4, 1. So then we go to blue. We got W is up 3 to the right 1. So we draw that way, or we write that as X is over 1 up 3 and end with our bracket. And then last but not least, we have vector A, and vector A is 1, 2, 3. So you go back 3 and down 4. So we get these vectors. Now, I guess we could write these two. Go back up. I guess it really doesn't label them very well yet. So I would write it as, I'll go back and correct these sort of, but not really correct them, but so like V, for example, we should be writing like vector V, or in blue, W, vector W equals. Okay, so I guess I can kind of correct that, so that equals vector U, and purple is vector A. Okay, just small detail, but in general, though, getting it to component form in standard position, you bring the start of the vector to 0, 0, and then you use the triangle brackets, and you write out the x, y coordinate. And we'll stop there. We'll do this next piece as the second video.